The grand chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive station built around a dying star. Inside, 247 species sat in their designated seats, waiting. The air was thick with tension. Everyone knew why they were here. Commander Hyan-Woo stood in the center of the chamber, his blue uniform standing out against the strange colors and shapes of the alien representatives. He kept his face calm, even though his heart was beating fast. Behind him, 2 human guards stood at attention. They were the only humans in a room filled with beings who wanted them gone. Belthara rose from the highest seat. The creature was tall, made of living crystal that caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. Its voice echoed through the chamber, translated into thousands of languages at once. Commander Hyan-Woo of Earth, the Galactic Council has reached its decision. Your species will disarm all military vessels within 30 standard days. You will surrender command of your fleet to Council oversight. You will submit to our laws and our justice. This is not a negotiation. This is an order. Hyan-Woo looked up at the crystal being. He had practiced this moment 100 times. He knew what he had to say. But knowing and doing were different things. When he spoke, his voice was steady. We decline. The chamber erupted. Aliens shrieked, roared, and made sounds that human ears were never meant to hear. Some species beat their appendages against their seats. Others released clouds of colored gas that their translators turned into curses. Belthara raised one crystalline arm, and silence fell again. Decline. Do you understand what you are refusing, human? The Council commands 12 million warships. Your entire species has fewer vessels than we lose in routine accidents. You have 11 billion individuals. We have 900 trillion. You are nothing. You are dust. And yet you decline? Hyan-Woo nodded once. Yes, we decline. 6 months earlier, Captain Ji-won had been having a good day. Her patrol route was quiet, just her ship and 3 others cruising along the edge of human space. The stars were beautiful out here, away from Earth's crowded orbitals. She was thinking about her daughter's birthday next month when the distress signal came through. It was weak, scrambled, and it shouldn't have been there. The coordinates put it in empty space, light years from any known settlement. Ji-won was supposed to ignore unauthorized signals. But something in the static sounded wrong, desperate. Change course, she told her crew. Let's check it out. They found the station 3 hours later. It was hidden inside a dead planet's gravity well, invisible to most scanners. The station was huge, big enough to hold a small city, but it wasn't on any map. No identification codes. No response to hails. Ji-won sent a boarding team. What they found made her blood turn cold. 40,000 beings locked in cells. Some were humanoid. Others were unlike anything in the databases. All of them were thin, scarred, and terrified. The station was a prison, but worse than that, it was a laboratory. The Council had been experimenting on them. G-1 made her decision in seconds. Get them out. All of them. And plant charges on the station's core. Her crew worked for 6 hours straight, evacuating the prisoners to their ships and the cargo freighters they called in. When the last prisoner was clear, G-1 personally triggered the explosives. The station tore itself apart in a flash of light that would be visible for light years. 2 weeks later, the Council demanded her arrest. They called her a terrorist. They said she had destroyed a legitimate research facility and stolen Council property. The prisoners, they claimed, were criminals and volunteers. Earth's government investigated. They interviewed the freed prisoners. They examined the station's records that G-1's people had copied. The truth was undeniable. The Council had been running black sites across the galaxy, kidnapping species they considered inferior and using them for experiments. When Earth refused to hand over G-1, the Council cut all diplomatic ties. When Earth demanded explanations, the Council stopped responding. When Earth insisted on justice, the Council called it an act of war. Admiral Taejong stood before the United Nations Assembly and laid out the numbers. He used a holographic display that showed the galaxy in blue light. Red dots marked Council fleets. Tiny green dots marked human ships, They have 12 million warships, he said. His voice was tired but steady. He had not slept in 3 days. We have 80,000. They have 900 trillion citizens across 10,000 worlds. We have 11 billion people on 6 worlds and a few dozen stations. By every measure that matters, we cannot win a war against them. A diplomat named Hannah stood up. She was young, fresh from the academy, and she asked the question everyone was thinking. Then why are we even considering this? Shouldn't we just give them what they want? Taeyang looked at her for a long moment. Then he changed the display. Now it showed images from the black site. Beings in cages. Surgical equipment. Bodies. This is what they want, he said. They want us to bow, to obey, to accept that might makes right and that we have no choice but to submit. They want us to pretend we didn't see what Captain G1 found. They want us to hand over a good officer who did the right thing so they can make an example of her. He changed the image again. Now it showed Earth, blue and beautiful against the black. I'm not saying we can win a conventional war, but I am saying that if we surrender now, we're agreeing that we have no rights. That humans are just another species the Council can push around whenever it wants. And if we agree to that, then what's the point of having a fleet at all? What's the point of calling ourselves free? Hannah sat down slowly. Around the assembly, the representatives were quiet. Another delegate raised his hand. What are you proposing, Admiral? Taeyang smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. I'm proposing that we don't have to win. We just have to make them regret starting this fight. We make every battle cost them so much that continuing isn't worth it. We make them understand that humans don't surrender just because someone bigger tells us to. The vote took 3 hours. When it was done, Earth had made its choice. They would not disarm. They would not surrender Giwan. They would not bow to the Council's demands. Back in the Grand Chamber, Valthara stared down at Commander Heianwu. The Crystal Bean's voice was cold and sharp. Then you have chosen extinction. The Council will assemble its fleets. In 30 days, we will come to your worlds. We will sweep aside your pathetic ships. We will occupy your planets. And we will teach your species what happens to those who defy us. This is your last chance, human. Reconsider. Heianwu shook his head. We won't. And when your fleets come, they'll learn something too. They'll learn that humans don't break easily. He turned and walked toward the exit, his guards following. Behind him, the chamber erupted again in chaos, but Heianwu didn't look back. He had delivered Earth's message. The war had begun. The first. Armada arrived at Kepler Station exactly 30 days after the Council's ultimatum expired. 500,000 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Their commanders were confident. This would be over in hours. The fleet's admiral was a being named Torthan, a member of the Krethic species. He had fought in 40 campaigns and never lost a battle. As his flagship settled into position, he studied the human station ahead. It looked small and weak. A cylinder of metal and lights, barely 10 kilometers long. Scan the area, Torthan ordered. Find their fleet. His sensors officer worked quickly. Admiral, I'm reading no ships in the immediate vicinity. The station appears to be operating on minimal power. It might be abandoned. Torthan felt a stirring of doubt. This was too easy. But his orders were clear. Take the station. Secure the system. Move on to Earth. All ships. Advance. Weapons ready. The Armada moved forward like a wave of steel and fire. 500,000 ships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. They spread out in attack formation, surrounding the station from all sides. Colonel Bin watched from his hiding spot in the asteroid field. His 3,000 ships were hidden among the rocks, their engines cold and their weapons systems dark. He had been waiting here for 5 days, floating in silence while his crews tried not to go crazy from boredom. Now, finally, the Council fleet was here, and they were doing exactly what Admiral Taeyang had predicted. They were overconfident. Bin watched his tactical display as the Council ships entered the kill zone. He counted down in his head. 3, 2, 1. Kepler Station erupted with light. The small, weak station suddenly revealed itself as something very different. Hidden weapons ports opened along its entire length. Hundreds of missile tubes fired at once, spitting out thousands of warheads. Railguns that had been disguised as structural supports began firing, hurling slugs of metal at nearly the speed of light. The council ships closest to the station simply vanished, torn apart by the sudden barrage. The ones behind them tried to scatter, but they were too close together. Ships collided with other ships. Weapons fire meant for the station hit friendly vessels instead. In the first 30 seconds, the council lost 15,000 ships. Then Bin's fleet powered up their engines and came, screaming out of the asteroid field. 3,000 human ships against 500,000 council vessels. It should have been suicide. But Bin wasn't trying to win a fair fight. His ships carried weapons the council had never seen before. Nuclear-pumped plasma lances, kinetic kill missiles with adaptive AI, and the newest weapon in humanity's arsenal. Something the engineers called the Hellstorm.
Ow.
Each ship carried just one, because each one took months to build and cost more than a small city. All ships, Bin said. Fire Hellstorms on my mark. Target grid Delta 7 mark. 3,000 devices launched from human ships, each one small enough to hold in your hands. They flew into the council formation and detonated simultaneously. What happened next looked like someone had torn a hole in reality. The devices created brief, unstable wormholes that shredded everything within a kilometer. Another 80,000 council ships died in an instant. The battle raged for 6 hours. The humans lost ships every minute, their smaller numbers whittled down by sheer volume of fire. But they took a terrible toll on the council forces. Every human ship that died took 50 council vessels with it. Every missile humanity fired seemed to find its target. Colonel Bin's flagship took 3 direct hits and lost its entire port side. He kept fighting, using maneuvering thrusters to spin his dying ship around and rake a council dreadnought with point defense fire. When his weapons ran dry, he rammed it. By the time the council fleet finally retreated, they had lost 127,000 ships. The humans had lost 1,200 vessels. Bin was dead, along with 40,000 other crew members. But Kepler Station still stood, and the council's first armada was in shambles. The survivors broadcast everything they had seen back to council space. The transmissions were incoherent, filled with panic and disbelief. They fought like demons, one captain reported. They weren't afraid to die. Every ship fought to the last. What kind of species does that? On Earth, engineer Sujin stood in the middle of the largest factory humanity had ever built. The facility stretched for kilometers underground, built in the months leading up to the war. Automated systems worked day and night, building ships faster than anyone had thought possible. She studied the production numbers on her tablet. 1,200 ships lost. 3,200 new ships ready to launch. Another 8,000 under construction. The math was brutal but simple. As long as they could build ships faster than the council could destroy them, humanity had a chance. Her assistant approached, looking nervous. "Ma'am, we're getting reports of council fleet movements. They're pulling ships from all over the galaxy. Analysts think they're preparing a much larger force." Sujin nodded. She had expected this. The council had lost one battle. They would come back with overwhelming force next time. How many ships are we talking about? Early estimates say 2 million. Maybe more. Sujin felt cold. Humanity's entire fleet was only 79,000 ships now, after the losses at Kepler. Even with the new construction, they'd have maybe 90,000 by the time the council attacked again. "We'll need to build faster," she said. "Double shifts. Triple if we have to. And start work on the new defensive platforms for Mars and Luna." Across the galaxy, the news of Kepler Station spread like fire. Species that had been conquered by the council centuries ago heard about humanity's victory. They whispered about it in their homes, careful not to let council monitors overhear. Some of them started to hope Captain G1 visited the refugees she had freed from the Black Site. They were living in temporary housing on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. 40,000 beings from dozens of species, all trying to adjust to their new freedom. A reptilian warrior named Krell approached her. He was 3 meters tall, covered in scales, and his species had been marked for extinction by the Council 70 years ago. Only a few thousand of his people remained, scattered and hiding. "Captain G1, he said in rough but understandable English. "My people want to fight." G1 looked up at him. "You don't have to. You're safe here." Krell shook his head. "We are not safe anywhere while the Council exists. They came to our world and killed billions. They took the survivors and used us for experiments. We thought we were alone, but you showed us we're not. You stood up to them. Let us stand with you." An insectoid engineer from another freed species stepped forward. "My people have ships, hidden. The Council thought they destroyed them all, but we saved 600 vessels. Old, but functional. And I can improve your shield technology. Make it stronger." More refugees came forward, each one offering something. Weapons, ships, intelligence about Council fleet movements. Knowledge of ancient defense systems. GSUN felt something she hadn't felt since the war started. Not quite hope, but something close. Humanity wasn't alone. She sent a message to Admiral Taeyong. "Sir, we have allies. Not many, but they're willing to fight. Permission to start coordinating with them?" The response came back within an hour. "Permission granted. We'll take every bit of help we can get. The Council is coming back, and they're angry." In the Grand Chamber, Velthara addressed the assembled Council members. The crystal being's voice was sharp with fury. "The humans humiliated us. 127,000 ships destroyed by a species that should have been crushed in minutes. This is unacceptable. We will assemble the largest fleet in Council history. We will destroy every human ship. We will occupy every human world, and we will make an example of them that will be remembered for 10,000 years." The Council voted unanimously for total war. 2 million ships would be assembled. Earth would be the target. Humanity would be erased from the galaxy. But as the Council members filed out of the chamber, several of them noticed something strange. The guards looked nervous. The servants were whispering, and on a dozen Council worlds, there were reports of unrest. Minor rebellions. Acts of sabotage. The humans had done more than bloody the Council's nose. They had shown the galaxy that the Council could bleed, and across 10,000 worlds, oppressed species were starting to wonder, if the humans could fight back, maybe they could too. The war was just beginning. The rebellion started on a world called Deska. 72 light years from Earth, the Deskans were a peaceful species that had been under Council rule for 300 years. They grew food for the Council's armies and asked for nothing in return, except to be left alone. On the morning the rebellion began, scone farmers stopped loading grain onto Council transport ships. When Council officials demanded to know why, the farmers simply pointed at a broadcast screen. On it, a recording of the Battle of Kepler Station played on loop. 500,000 Council ships had attacked. Less than half had survived. "If the humans can say no," an old Deskan farmer said, "then so can we." The Council garrison tried to enforce order, but there were only 500 Council troops on Deska and 8 million Deskans. The garrison was overwhelmed in hours. The Deskans seized the orbital defenses and declared independence. The same thing happened on 71 other worlds. Species that had been crushed under Council rule for centuries suddenly rose up. They destroyed Council buildings. They freed prisoners. They broadcast messages to their neighbors saying one thing over and over: "We are not afraid anymore." Commander Daehyun led a team of 12 special operations soldiers on a mission deep in Council space. Their target was a weapons depot on a moon called Farkos. The depot supplied 3 entire Council fleets with missiles and ammunition. Daehyun's team landed their stealth ship in the moon's dark side and hiked 15 kilometers to the depot. They spent 6 hours placing charges on key structures. When they detonated, the entire depot went up in a chain reaction that lit up the moon's surface. But destroying the depot wasn't the main mission. While the base burned, Daehyun met with representatives from the local resistance. They were Farkosians, a bird-like species that the Council used as manual laborers. We brought you weapons, Dahan said, opening crates filled with human rifles and explosives. But more importantly, we brought you information. He showed them how to build improvised explosives from common materials, how to disable Council surveillance systems, how to organize cells so that if one group was captured, the others could continue fighting, how to strike and fade away before the enemy could respond. The Council thinks in terms of big battles and large fleets, Dahan explained. They don't know how to fight an enemy they can't see. Make them afraid of their own shadows. Make every occupied world cost them resources they can't spare. The Fracosians learned quickly. Within a month, Council installations across their region were under constant attack. Supply lines were disrupted. Officials were assassinated. The Council was forced to pull back fleet elements to deal with the unrest. Admiral Tai Yang watched the galactic map in his command center on Earth. Red dots showed Council fleet movements. Green dots showed human forces. And now, purple dots showed active rebellions. There were hundreds of purple dots, and more appeared every day. The Council's infrastructure was collapsing under the weight of 1,000 small fires. It's working, said his tactical officer. The Council is pulling ships from their forward positions. Their assault fleet is smaller than we expected, down to 1.7 million vessels from the 2 million they planned. Tiang nodded, but his expression was grim. 1.7 million is still more than enough to destroy us. How long until they reach Earth? 48 hours, sir. 48 hours. Taeyang had used the time since Kepler's station well. Mars had been transformed into a fortress, bristling with weapons. The asteroid belt was now a minefield that stretched across millions of kilometers. Jupiter's moons held hidden fleets waiting to ambush the Council's forces, and Earth itself was surrounded by defense platforms that made Kepler's station look small. But it wouldn't be enough. Taeyang had run the simulations 1,000 times. Earth's defenses could destroy maybe half the Council fleet. That still left 800,000 enemy ships to finish the job. Send the evacuation orders, he said quietly. All non-essential personnel are to leave Earth within 24 hours. Priority goes to children and those with critical skills. His officer hesitated. Sir, people are going to panic. But better panic than pretending we can save everyone. We're going to lose this battle. Our job is to make sure humanity survives anyway. Across Earth, the evacuation began. Ships designed to carry cargo were hastily converted to passenger vessels. Colony ships that had been under construction for Mars missions were pressed into service. Millions of people boarded anything that could fly. Heading for the outer colonies and beyond, Lieutenant Youngmi worked in communications, coordinating the massive refugee movement. She had sent her own family away on one of the first ships. Her mother had begged her to come too, but Youngmi had volunteered to stay. Someone had to keep the communication networks running. During a brief break, she monitored the public broadcasts from across the galaxy. What she heard shocked her. Dozens of species were sending messages of support to Earth. Some sent ships to help defend. Others sent supplies. A few even sent volunteers willing to fight and die alongside humans. One message particularly stood out. It came from Krell, the reptilian warrior G1 had freed. People of Earth, Krell said in his deep, rumbling voice, you are not alone. When my people faced extinction, we thought the galaxy had abandoned us. But you showed us that there are still those who will fight for what's right. My fleet is small, only 600 ships. But they are yours. We will stand with you because you stood with us. Yumi felt tears on her cheeks. She saved the message and added it to a compilation she was building. Commander Haiyan Wu had asked her to do something important. He wanted her to create a broadcast that could be sent across the entire galaxy before the battle began. She worked for 6 hours straight, editing together footage from Kepler Station, interviews with freed slaves, and messages from the rebellions. She added Haiyan Wu's speech, the one he had recorded just that morning. When she was finished, she reviewed it one last time. Haiyan Wu's face filled the screen, his expression calm but determined. Behind him, Earth floated in all its blue beauty. They think we're afraid, he said. The Galactic Council believes that because they have more ships and more soldiers, we will break. But they don't understand humans. We've faced extinction before. Ice ages that should have killed us. Volcanoes that turned our skies dark. Plagues that ravaged our populations. Wars we fought against ourselves. Every time, we survived by standing together. Today we stand not just for Earth, but for every species the Council has oppressed. For the Veskans who are rising up. For the Farkosians who are fighting back. For Krell's people who refuse to be erased. For every being who has ever been told they are too weak, too small, too insignificant to matter. In 48 hours, the Council's fleet will arrive. They will try to crush us. They will expect us to surrender. But they're going to learn something they should have known from the start. Humans don't break easily. And when you push us into a corner, we push back. To the Council forces who will attack us. We don't hate you. We know many of you are just following orders. But we will not submit. We will fight for every meter of space. We will make you pay for every planet you try to take. And when this is over, win or lose, you will remember us. To the species watching this broadcast, you are not powerless. The Council has ruled through fear for too long. But fear only works if you let it. Stand up, fight back, take your freedom, because no one will give it to you. Unto my fellow humans, I'm proud of you. Proud of every soldier who will stand the line tomorrow. Proud of every engineer building defenses. Proud of every citizen who refused to give in to despair. We are small, but we are not weak. We are outnumbered, but we are not alone. And whatever happens, the galaxy will remember that humanity stood its ground.
What?
Young Me uploaded the broadcast to every communication network she could access. Within minutes, it was playing on 10,000 worlds. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On Earth, people stopped their evacuation preparations to watch. On Council worlds, the broadcast was banned, but that only made it spread faster. On Rebel planets, it played in public squares while crowds cheered. And on the Council flagship, Elthera watched the human commander's speech with something close to fear. Not fear of humanity's military might. Fear of what the humans represented. An idea. A simple, dangerous idea that was spreading across the galaxy like a virus. The idea that tyranny could be resisted. The Council. Fleet accelerated toward Earth, determined to crush this rebellion before it inspired the entire galaxy. But across the void, thousands of ships from dozens of species were also converging on Earth, not to conquer it, but to defend it. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin. And for the first time in millennia, the outcome was not certain. The Council fleet arrived in two waves. First came the Scouts, 5,000 ships that dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Mars orbit. They scanned the system and reported back what they found. Then, the main fleet arrived. 1.7 million warships appeared in space like a steel storm. Blocking out the stars, Admiral Taeyang. Watched from his command station on Earth, his tactical displays showed the Council fleet as a red mass so large it looked like a solid wall. Against it, Earth's defense fleet was a thin green line. 90,000 human ships plus another 110,000 vessels from rebel species and volunteers. 200,000 ships against 1.7 million. The odds were worse than he had calculated. All ships, Taeyang said calmly. Activate defense pattern Gamma. Do not engage until they reach the first marker. The Council fleet moved forward confidently. They had learned from Kepler's station. This time, they advanced in waves, with scouts ahead looking for traps. This time, they kept their ships spread out to avoid concentrated fire. This time, they would not be surprised. What they didn't know was that Mars itself was the trap. The planet had been transformed over the past months. Every mountain had been hollowed out and filled with weapons. Every canyon held missile batteries. The polar ice caps concealed massive railguns that could fire slugs the size of buildings. And buried deep in the Martian core was something engineer Sujin had built personally. She called it the Heart of Mars. When the Council fleet reached the first marker, 50 million kilometers from Mars, Taeyang gave the order. Light them up. Mars erupted. 10,000 hidden weapons positions fired at once. The planet's entire surface seemed to glow with launch flares. Millions of missiles streaked toward the Council fleet. Railgun slugs followed, moving so fast they appeared as lines of light. The Council's front ranks simply vanished. 50,000 ships destroyed in the opening barrage. The ones behind raised shields and tried to return fire, but Mars was already launching its second wave, and its third, and its fourth. Heart of Mars, Taeyang ordered, "Activate." Deep in the planet's core, Sujan's creation came online. It was a weapon humanity had only theorized about before the war. A planet-scale electromagnetic pulse generator. When it fired, it sent out a wave of energy that fried every unshielded electronic system within 100 million kilometers. 60,000 Council ships dropped out of formation, their systems dead. They drifted helplessly, while the rest of the fleet tried to continue the advance. That's when the defense fleet struck. 200,000 ships came screaming out from behind Mars, weapons firing. Led by Captain Minho and his fighter craft, they tore into the Council's disorganized formations. Minho was a pilot, not a ship commander. His craft was small and fast, armed with only a few missiles and a pair of plasma guns. But he flew like someone possessed. He weaved between Council battleships, targeting their engines and weapons ports. Behind him, thousands of other fighters followed his lead. The Council tried to swat them away like insects, but the fighters were too quick. And while they distracted the Council's point defenses, the larger human ships moved in for killing blows. The battle raged for 3 days. The space between Mars and Earth became a graw. Veered of broken ships and expanding debris clouds, the Council fleet pushed forward meter by meter, paying for every kilometer with thousands of ships. On day 4, the Council broke through the outer defenses and reached the asteroid belt. Here, humanity's minefield was waiting. Millions of explosives hidden among the rocks detonated as Council ships passed. Another 100,000 vessels were destroyed, but the Council kept coming. They had numbers. They had time, and they had the will to win at any cost. Captain Minho's fighter was on its last legs. He had been flying for 4 days straight, taking combat stimulants to stay awake. His ship had taken damage in 3 different engagements. The cockpit smelled like burned circuits and his own sweat. He saw the Council dreadnought ahead. A massive vessel, 3 kilometers long. It was leading a spearhead formation trying to punch through to Earth. If it succeeded, hundreds of thousands of Council ships would follow. Minho looked at his fuel gauge, empty. His missiles were gone. His plasma guns had maybe 10 shots left. He had nothing that could hurt a ship that large. But he did have velocity, mass, and the will to make it count. He switched his communications to an open channel so everyone could hear. "This is Captain Minho, to all human forces. It's been an honor serving with you. Tell my family I love them." Before anyone could respond, he pushed his throttle to maximum and aimed straight for the dreadnoughts. Bridge. The fighter accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. When it hit, the impact released energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The dreadnought's forward section simply ceased to exist. The ship broke in half, both pieces tumbling away helplessly. Across the human fleet, pilots watched what Minho had done. And then, one by one, hundreds of them made the same choice. When your weapons were empty and your ship was dying anyway, you could still take one more enemy with you. The Council fleet had never encountered an enemy willing to do this. In their long history, species either surrendered or fought until they lost. They didn't deliberately sacrifice themselves. It was wasteful, irrational, but it was also devastating. Every suicide run destroyed at least 1 Council ship, often more, and it created terror among the Council crews. They started flinching from damaged human ships, afraid they might be next. Their formations became scattered. Their advance slowed. On day 6, the Council fleet reached Earth's orbital defenses. The defense platforms opened fire with everything they had. The battle entered its final phase. This would decide everything. Admiral Taeyang coordinated the defense from Earth's command center. He had not slept in 6 days. He looked like a ghost, pale and thin. But his voice was still steady as he gave orders. Captain G1 commanded Earth's final reserve. 30,000 ships held back for this moment. She led them in a desperate charge against the Council's command carrier, the largest ship in their fleet. It took her 4 hours of brutal fighting, but she reached it. Her flagship was crippled, bleeding atmosphere from a dozen holes. Half her crew was dead, but she still had one weapon left, the self-destruct. "All hands, this is the captain," she said over the ship's intercom. "Abandoned ship. You have 3 minutes." Her bridge crew stared at her in shock. "Captain, you need to evacuate too," her first officer said. Juan shook her head. "Someone has to keep this ship on course. Someone has to make sure we hit the target. That's my job. Now go." "That's an order." The crew reluctantly evacuated while G1 manually flew her dying ship toward the Council command carrier. Council point defense fire tore into her hull, but she kept going. When she was close enough, she armed the self-destruct and locked the controls. The explosion consumed both ships. The Council fleet suddenly lost coordination as their command structure died. Ships began receiving contradictory orders, or no orders at all. The careful formations fell apart. Earth's defense fleet pressed their advantage. They attacked the confused Council ships from every direction. The asteroid defense platforms kept firing, and the brave pilots kept making their final runs. By the end of Day 6, the Council fleet had been reduced to 800,000 ships. But Earth's fleet was down to just 15,000 vessels. Mars was a scorched ruin, its surface melted by the bombardment. Half of Earth's orbital platforms were destroyed. The fighting paused as both sides regrouped. In the Council fleet, the surviving commanders argued about what to do. They had lost 900,000 ships. 900,000 against a species that wasn't supposed to be able to fight at all. One commander suggested retreat. Another demanded they press forward and finish the job. A third proposed negotiating fur, watching away, sent new orders away. Sent new orders. Continue the assault. Destroy Earth. I don't care how many ships it costs. The humans must be erased. But something had broken in the Council fleet. The commanders had lost too many friends, too many ships. They had seen humans ram dreadnoughts with fighters. They had watched an entire species choose death over surrender, and they were scared. On the rebel worlds, the uprisings intensified. 50 Council member planets were now in open revolt. The Council's economy was collapsing. Supply lines were cut. Communications were disrupted. The great empire was tearing itself apart, and on Earth, Admiral Taeyong received an unexpected message. It came from the Council fleet itself. One of their commanders, a being named Korthon, was breaking ranks.
"Admiral,"
the message said, "I have 12,000 ships under my command. I'm done following Velthara's orders. If you guarantee safe passage for my crews, I will stand down and allow you to repair your defenses. Some of us never wanted this war, and now we can see it's wrong." Taeyong stared at the message for a long moment. Then he authorized the response. Safe passage granted. Welcome to the side of freedom. The tide was turning. But the battle for Earth was far from over. The news of Korthon's defection spread through the Council fleet like a disease. By the next morning, 30,000 more ships had declared they would not continue the assault on Earth. Some joined Korthon. Others simply left, heading back to their home worlds. Velthara responded with fury. The Crystal being sent orders to arrest the defectors and execute their commanders. But the orders were ignored. The Council's authority was crumbling. On 70 Council worlds, the local governments declared independence. They announced they would no longer take orders from the Grand Chamber. They would no longer send troops to fight humanity. They would no longer participate in the oppression of other species. The Council made its final gambit. Velthara ordered every remaining loyal ship to gather for one last assault. 4 million vessels from across the galaxy began converging on Earth's system. It would take them weeks to arrive, but when they did, nothing would survive. Admiral Taejong knew Earth couldn't withstand another battle like the last one. His fleet was decimated. Mars was gone. The orbital defenses were barely functional. Earth needed time to rebuild, and time was something they didn't have. But then the messages started arriving. First from the Veskans, pledging their newly liberated fleet. Then from the Farkosians. Then from dozens of other rebel species. And finally from the defectors like Korthon. "We're sending ships," they all said. "We're coming to help defend Earth." Yami coordinated the communications as ship after ship pledged to join Earth's defense. She watched the tactical display as green dots began appearing across the galaxy, all moving toward Earth, hundreds of them, then thousands. Lieutenant Admiral Tejong said, appearing at her station. "How many ships are we expecting?" Young Mi ran the calculations. "Sir, current estimates show 1.5 million vessels from 18 different species. They're calling themselves the Coalition for Free Worlds." Taeyong stared at the numbers. Humanity had started this war alone with 80,000 ships. Now, 3 months later, they were leading an alliance of 1.5 million vessels. "It seemed impossible," he said quietly. "I guess we won't be alone for the final battle." Council's 4 million ships arrived in deep space. 3 light years from Earth, they expected to face Earth's broken defenses. Instead, they found the Coalition fleet waiting for them. 1.5 million warships from species the Council had oppressed for centuries. All standing together? Commander Heianwu, now promoted to Grand Admiral of the Coalition forces, sent a single message to the Council fleet. "Turn back. This war is over. You've already lost. Don't make us destroy you." The Council's response was to open fire. 4 million ships against 1.5 million. The Council still had the numbers, but they no longer had the will. The battle lasted 3 days. It was fought across a volume of space larger than most solar systems. Ships died by the thousands every hour. The void filled with debris and radiation. Energy weapons turned vacuum into plasma. Missiles created temporary stars. The Coalition fleet fought with coordination the Council couldn't match. Humans provided tactical analysis. The Scan told logistics. Farkosians operated advanced sensors. Krell's warriors led boarding actions. Every species contributed what they did best. On the second day, Heianwu ordered a daring move. He took 50,000 ships, mostly fast attack craft, and bypassed the main Council fleet. They went straight for the Council's command carrier, the largest vessel in the galaxy. It was 3 times the size of any other ship. It's a mobile station containing the Council's military leadership. The carrier was heavily defended. But Heianwu had learned from G1's sacrifice. He didn't try to destroy it. Instead, his Marines boarded it. Thousands of soldiers from dozens of species fought through the carrier's corridors. It took 8 hours of brutal close combat. But they reached the command deck. They found Valthara there, along with the other Council military leaders. The crystal being looked at Heianwu with something like disbelief. "How?" Valthara asked. "You were nothing. A single species with barely any ships. How did you do this?" Heianwu smiled grimly. "We didn't. You did this to yourselves. Every species you oppressed was waiting for someone to show them it was possible to fight back. We were just the first to try. The rest did the hard work." With the command carrier captured, the Council fleet fell apart. Some ships surrendered. Others retreated to their homeworlds. The Council's military power, built over millennia, was broken in 3 days. The casualty numbers were staggering. The Coalition had lost 600,000 ships. Millions of beings had died. But they had won. The Galactic Council's reign of tyranny was over. 1 year later, the Galactic Assembly met for the first time. Unlike the Council, every species had an equal voice. There were no masters, no subjects. Just representatives trying to build something better. The Assembly met in a new station built in neutral space. The design was deliberately simple, nothing like the Council's grand chamber. Round tables instead of hierarchical seating. Natural light instead of dramatic shadows. A place for cooperation, not domination. Grand Admiral Heianwu gave the opening address. He looked tired, older than his years. The war had cost him friends and weighed heavily on his soul. But he stood straight as he spoke. "We didn't fight this war because we weren't afraid," he said. "Every human who went into battle was terrified. Every soldier who made the final sacrifice was scared. Fear is natural. It's what you do with that fear that matters. We chose to fight not because we were certain we would win, but because surrender meant accepting that might makes right, that the strong can oppress the weak without consequence. That freedom is a privilege granted by those in power, not a right belonging to all thinking beings." The council believed that they could rule through fear. They were wrong. Fear can control people for a while, but it can't last forever. Eventually, someone will stand up. Someone will say no. And when they do, others will follow. This assembly represents something the galaxy has never seen before. A union of equals. A place where disputes are settled through discussion, not domination. Where every species, no matter how small or weak, has a voice. It won't be perfect. We'll argue. We'll disagree. Some species will have old grudges against others, but we'll work through it together as equals. Because that's what civilization should be. Not the strong ruling the weak, but all of us trying to build something better. To honor those who died in the war, we must make sure their sacrifice meant something. We must build a galaxy where no species lives in fear, where children grow up free, where the powerful are held accountable, where justice is more than just a word. The war is over. The hard work of peace begins now. Let's make sure we get it right. The assembly erupted in applause. Beings from hundreds of species stood and cheered. It was messy, chaotic, and far from the organized ceremonies the council used to hold. But it was genuine. Lieutenant Youngme, now promoted to communications director for the assembly, watched from Earth. The planet was still rebuilding. Parts of the surface had been damaged in the final battle. Mars would take decades to restore. But humanity had survived. More than that, humanity had changed the galaxy. The Council's black sites had been opened, and the prisoners freed. The slave systems had been shut down. Hundreds of species that had been marked for extinction were now protected. And the dream of a free galaxy was becoming real. Young Me thought about everyone who had died to make this possible. Colonel Bin, at Kepler Station. Captain Minho, ramming the dreadnought. Captain G1, destroying the command carrier. Admiral Taeyong, who had died of a heart attack 3 months after the war ended. His body simply giving out from the stress. They had fought not because they were fearless, but because they refused to accept injustice. They had faced impossible odds and somehow won. Not through superior firepower, but through the strength of their conviction and the support of others. Who shared their dream? She opened her personal logs and began writing. Someone needed to tell the full story of what had happened. Not just the battles and tactics, but the people. The scared soldiers who fought anyway, the engineers who worked until they collapsed, the diplomats who built bridges between former enemies, the civilians who kept society functioning while their world was under siege. Future generations needed to know what the price of freedom had been. And they needed to remember that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was doing what was right, despite being afraid. On the rebuilt station where the assembly met, a monument was unveiled. It listed the names of everyone who had died in the war, human and alien alike. Millions of names carved into black stone. At the top, a simple inscription in every known language. They stood when others bowed. They fought when others surrendered. They died so others could be free. Remember them, honor them, and never let their sacrifice be forgotten. Hyunwoo stood before the monument, his hand touching the stone. He found the names he was looking for: Bin Minho, Ji-won, Taeyong, so many others. "We did it," he whispered to them. "The galaxy is free. I hope that's enough. I hope it was worth it." The wind carried his words away into the void. Around him, the station bustled with activity. Diplomats from 100 worlds working together. Traders from distant systems exchanging goods. Children from different species playing together, their differences irrelevant. A new galaxy was being born. One built on cooperation instead of domination. On justice instead of power. On hope instead of fear, and somewhere among the stars, the spirits of those who had fought and died could rest. They had done the impossible. They had shown the galaxy that tyranny could be defeated, that the strong did not have an inherent right to rule the weak, that courage and conviction could overcome even the longest odds. Humanity had entered the galactic stage as unknowns, dismissed and underestimated. They were leaving it as legends. The species that wasn't afraid, the people who looked at impossible odds and fought anyway, the beings who taught the galaxy the true meaning of freedom. The council had declared war, thinking it would be over in days. They were right that it would be over quickly. They were just wrong about who would win, because they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed humanity would be afraid, and they had learned far too late that fear and surrender are not the same thing. You can be afraid and still fight. You can face overwhelming odds and still resist. You can know you might lose and still stand your ground. That was the lesson humanity taught the galaxy. Not that they were fearless, but that they were brave. And in the end, that made all the difference.